Today we're trying alcohol markers out on 4 different types of paper: printer paper, sketchbook paper, marker paper, and watercolor paper. So we're gonna see how they work on the different papers. I drew out these little ice cream cats so we could try out the same drawing with the same ink on every single piece of paper. So let's get started. First one up is the printer paper. Printer paper is pretty thin and it's definitely not made for alcohol markers. It's usually just made for, printing from your printer onto like the paper. The markers glide relatively smoothly along the paper with just a little bit of drag. So far it does look like the finish is pretty smooth. Not too bad. I do think that if I layered the ink multiple times, it probably would start to bleed through and shred the paper. But let's move on to the sketchbook paper. I have used sketchbook paper with alcohol markers a few times in the past, and I've thought that it's workable. There is a significant amount more of drag with this one. The brush tip doesn't glide as smoothly, and I have to force it a little bit to glide it along the paper. I do notice that the colors are coming through a lot more vibrantly and not as streaky as I might expect. It does seem to take a little bit more time, and I'm always trying to get a smooth finish with the color. So next up is the marker paper. This paper is made for using with alcohol markers. Brush tip glides incredibly smooth along this paper. Surprisingly, there was a little streakiness here with this pink color, and it might just be that this marker is getting a bit low on ink. And finally, we have our watercolor paper. This is going to be the thickest paper that we're trying out today. My first impression is that paper does seem to absorb the ink pretty nicely in a way that's not feeling like the paper's in any trouble of ripping or anything. Pretty much a lot of drag here with the brush. It's taking a little bit of a longer time to cover all my surface here and make sure that I'm getting a nice flat and smooth finish. All right, so let's make some comparisons. I would say that the first notable difference here is the color. The color seems to be a little different on each one, not drastically, but just a bit. It seems to be a little more deep and vibrant on the sketchbook paper and the watercolor paper, and definitely a lot more light and pastel on the marker paper and the printer paper. And for the smoothness of the color, I would say for the sketchbook paper and the printer paper, they were the least smooth and the most streaky. It does seem like, surprisingly, on the printer paper, there's not too much bleeding of the colors, but over here on the sketchbook paper, there was quite a bit of spreading and bleeding of the ink, over the borders of the lines. There wasn't that issue with the marker paper, and not so much with the watercolor paper either. All right, so next I'm going to take off this tape and we're going to see if the ink bled through the paper. So here is the printer paper. It does seem like there was a bit of bleeding underneath the paper, as well as a bit with the sketchbook paper. So it does look like the marker paper did not bleed through to the other page, and neither did the watercolor paper. And looking at the back sides of the paper now, you can clearly see that the two bottom papers did not bleed through at all, only just a little bit here on this red. I do think that if I left the ink for a lot more time, definitely it would probably start to bleed through, but with just one coat of ink, there was bleed through on the printer paper and the sketchbook paper. All right, so that's it. Tested out 4 different papers with the alcohol markers. Let me know what you guys think, or if there's any other kind of paper I didn't try that I can try out next time. I do use all these papers with alcohol marker anyways, even if they do bleed through. If all I have is printer paper, then that's what I use. But it's just good to know sometimes how the ink is going to react with the paper. So I hope that this video was helpful and informational for you guys. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this and other stuff.